Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Wilds talk. Today we're talking about Title Update 2 as we get nearer and nearer to any real information about it. Today then, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at the history of title updates, looking back at World and Rise to see what happened there and what they could tell us about the title update in Wilds and what we might expect. For one, the big bad Lagiacrus is coming back. We are not expecting underwater combat, that's for sure, but we're expecting a fun and unique encounter. A lot of people feel that he's not a physically big enough monster for a siege. This is around the time that we started to see siege quests in the past. And personally, I am hoping that they use it as an excuse to do something interesting. Whether you assign that the term siege or just something big that really does affect the meta and gives us a reason to play, more than a few days. On that note, we are expecting more weapon updates as we have the May update landing with the hammer update and potential other weapon changes too. We do know that they're looking to readjust other weapons as the time progresses with title updates and maybe even updates between them. Maybe in Title Update 2, we'll also finally see the time of element, where, element hit zones maybe get changed, or overall element weapons and features get improved. The other thing we do know we're getting in this Title Update 2 is the next seasonal event, probably about 2 to 3 weeks in based on what we saw with Spring Blossom. This will be the Wilds version of the summer event then, which in the past we saw had a very carnival feeling, and as Spring Blossom proved, it'll be an optimal time to push specific grinds. It could be really efficient event quests for hunter rank levels, armor spheres for upgrading gear, zenny, cooking ingredients and more. And it only gets better with each seasonal event since we have even more event quests to consider. Oh, and I also forgot to mention that the arch-tempered version of our next Apex Predator is fully expected and probably will launch about a week after the seasonal event, just like we saw in Title Update 1. Which arch-tempered Apex are we expecting? Probably off Duna because of the summery theme and, it's the same region where we're expecting Lagiacrus. We'll see if they do anything interesting with the armor set and skills on that. We're hoping they do something unexpected, but I'm not too hopeful on that front. But yeah, that's also coming. Let's now look at the history of title updates and see what that can tell us. Starting with World, of course, and Title Update 2, which introduced Kulve Taroth, a new massive elder dragon at the time, with this cool concept of the mantle cloak, which you would slowly break apart, slowly exposing her, enraging her, making her be able to fight back more aggressively, and in doing so, you get the rewards. But this was the introduction of the siege concept, right? So it came in 3 parts. The first part was where Kulve is slowly, kind of casually, moving through these cavernous caves. Through that, you had pre-set up cannons to fire into her and other options to attack her. At part 2 then, you'd have a kind of semi-fight with minimalistic mechanics. The goal here is to decloak her as much as possible, break as many parts as you can, which will then force her to go to part 3, the final fight in a circular arena where she has proper enraged mechanics, certainly scary mechanics in general. And the goal here in the high rank version was to specifically break her horns in this final phase. Otherwise, she just kind of escapes and you won't get the best rewards. It wasn't until, say, the AT version of this fight then, where you had to actually slay her. So it was quite unique in a lot of different mechanics, and this was an ambitious beginning of the siege concept for a current gen Monster Hunter. Now with Kulve Taroth, of course, came equipment. So she had her own armor set, which was pretty solid at the time, but much more interesting was the unique weapon system that came with her. So the idea is that if you manage to do everything properly, you get the best opportunity for rewards. Those main rewards were preset weapons with their own names and preset stats. It was this insane list of potential drops per hunt, and most of them were definitely duds you'd regret finding. But the highest rarity had some real potential. The goal was to find those particularly good ones by running the fight until RNG basically blessed you with the correct drop. Unfortunately, because there was so many, more often than not, you'd find the ideal weapon drop for the wrong weapon you're actually after. But because the weapons were particularly good for the purpose of element and status, focuses on that, the right weapons that benefit the most from that, it really shined in this update, if you could actually get it to drop. So it was a real grind, which technically did breathe some life into the game for a good while, but it was quite RNG obviously. Now, other updates did come in Title Update 2 here, quality of life stuff. An interesting mechanic added here was when tempered monsters started to have flash bomb resistance, to increase the difficulty slightly. But it really was the kulve taroth update and the introduction of siege mechanics for current gen and what they're going to do with that. Which is why it's kind of the time for them to do that in Wilds, and why I wonder about Lagiacrus having some new unique mechanics related to siege. But then we have Title Update 2 for Iceborne. This was the first time an update had a surprise reveal, only put out right as Title Update 2 was going out. All the marketing was for the main monster of Title Update 2, which was Stygian zinogre, which to be fair is still cool with its own weapons and armor as you'd expect. It also introduced an update to the guiding lands in the form of the glacial area, which meant more enemy types could actually spawn there, which is cool. Thankfully, the true update was all about safi'jiiva, the adult form of the main big bad of base world, zinogre. This was another siege hunt, introducing a bunch of new mechanics. New weapons which could be awakened, a progression system for the hunt itself, under strict time limits, much more actual fighting the monster compared to kulve taroth, which was great. For example, there was this energy system where as you were dealing damage to safi'jiiva, you would progress to the next area. As it continued to drain the energy of the area and run out of resources, you'd force it into the final battle at the bottom. This was all under a pretty strict timer of about 20 minutes, and if you didn't achieve it, you'd just have Safi leave the fight. So, the siege aspect of this was the lobby system. The 16 players of the lobby would all be running their own versions of Safi hunts at the same time, and communally drain the energy system. So, as everyone does this over and over, the energy would get low enough that you'd be able to push Safi to the final area faster and faster, and actually fight for real with longer time to do so. A good team could drain the energy really quickly in one go, and then find themselves in the real hunt with enough time to defeat it on the second go, no problem. But the system allowed, newer players or struggling players to drain the energy over multiple attempts and have a much more forgiving timer because of it. Pretty clever. For the fight though, there was all kinds of zinogre style blasts and beam attacks, but the most memorable attack was the huge blue explosion where Safi would hang in the air, charge up a devastating attack, and you'd need to quickly find cover to hide behind to actually survive. But the thing is, you need to be dealing enough damage to avoid this attack happening without any cover to work behind. Now in regards to the rewards, yes, there was a new armor set as you'd expect, but more importantly, it had special weapons and an awakening system. Just like we saw with the kulve weapons then, they were tied to element and status, but this time it just kind of randomly assigned one of those to the weapon, and this time there was a new system to help you get what you wanted. So if you went in with a hammer, you'd at least get a hammer drop, that kind of thing, rather than true RNG, never even seeing the weapon type you're after with kulve taroth. So it's cool to see the way that they learned from the first siege they did. Anyway, the awakening system. Basically, you could upgrade the weapon multiple times with new benefits, with up to 5 awakened abilities attached to the weapon. You could very much compare that to the artian weapon system and reinforcement bonuses we have now in Wilds. Just like that then, you'd be looking at element, sharpness, affinity and raw upgrades, but there were some other interesting bonuses at the time. However, compared to the artian weapon RNG, with awakened weapons, you'd be offered 3 upgrade options and then maybe see not what you're looking for. Then you could choose to re-roll at the cost of more resources that you get from hunting Safi. This is pretty great because instead of straight RNG, you get 3 options rather than just 1 or something, and you could choose to re-roll and see what the options will be next time. Assuming you've got the resources, it'd be a pretty straightforward process to get what you wanted, at least compared to the artian true RNG of reinforced rolling. So honestly, pretty great system, especially with the way they visually changed the weapons as you continue to upgrade them. Very cool. So overall, this tells you that both the second title updates in World did result in a new endgame system. Both of them were tied to siege hunts with interesting mechanics. Both had their own unique weapon system and improved that in Iceborne compared to the base World version. So while people doubt that the Lagiacrus will be a siege fight, it is true that we do want a weapon system update, be that artian or something new. And this definitely feels like the right time for it based on the history of the title updates. They could just add a new layer to artian weapons. Okay, so now we move to Rise, which has a pretty big issue with this title update system. There was literally only 2 compared to the usual 5, and a lot of the details of title update 1 and 2 for Rise were essentially finishing Rise in the base version, meaning rather than updates to an already finished game, it was a way for them to actually finish the story and add the missing content of the base game. Though there was some fairness to this, the development of Rise was struck by the fun that was COVID at the time, and you have to remember, people make these games, and we as people were all affected by that crisis. So we have to look at the base Rise and its title update system with a heavy grain of salt, even if it was limited. Though, at very least, title update 2 for Rise was a pretty big deal. It actually finished Rise's main story, which was, until that point, on a pretty weird cliffhanger. It introduced All-Mother Nawa, the final big bad of the game, in a true form. In this fight, you had to actually defeat a different target first though, an Ibushi, then that was suddenly killed by All-Mother Nawa for the real fight. Down in the crater below, you deal with some crazy mechanics like being pulled and pushed around, and in a surprising but fun twist, you suddenly get help from a different monster during the fight, drawn by the loud nature of the battle. This would be the flagship monster, Magnamalo, or elder dragons like Kushala and Teostra. And you'd use the Rise Wyvern Ride mechanic to help you basically directly control them, get some free damage in, turn the fight around. However, unlike other title update 2 monsters we've looked at, we didn't actually get new weapons and armor in this one's case, which was very disappointing, but the materials were used to enhance the base versions of the Ibushi and Nawa equipment, so it at least had a purpose. But it didn't end on that sad note. There was other monsters included in this update, like a big deal that was valstrax, but not just a normal one, the Crimson Glow valstrax. This felt like an actual title update monster, where All-Mother was just meant to be part of the original release. So, Crimson Glow valstrax. It was a variant of the normal one, and marked the first time we see a variant before ever seeing a base version. These days in Wilds, we actually have a kind of comparison to that, with Fulgur Anjanath and Ebony Odegron compared to their normal versions, but as guardians in this case. So anyway, Crimson Glow valstrax. It did have weapons and armor, and both were visually and meta-wise fantastic, so that hit very well. Now on top of that, there was also the Apex system that its final update, Apex Zinogre, was added, and instead of being locked behind the Rampage system, you could actually just go hunt it, which was nice. It was my understanding at the time that this was basically the Thunderlord Zinogre, just with the Apex tag, so quite the fight. But because it was an Apex, that meant no new dedicated weapons and armor and skills, just Apex parts, which sucked. Though they did add a few other Apex hunts outside of the Rampage in this update, which is pretty nice, just not that rewarding. And lastly, they also added a new map, the Infernal Springs, which served as a special challenge map for some of the hardest content of the game, also used in Sunbreak. Overall then, we can't learn a lot for Wilds with this title update due to the context of it. It was largely finishing an unfinished game, but the valstrax update was certainly more comparable. A hype monster, a new variant, a real challenge. It hit really well. Interestingly, this wasn't a siege fight like the world ones we talked about, and there was no special weapon system added either, so it goes against that grain. Finally, we have the title update to Sunbreak version, the expansion of Rise. It introduced 3 main targets. Firstly, we had the Flaming Espinas, which is a subspecies seen in Frontier, introducing a new armor set and weapons. This introduced the idea that title update monsters got special properties and skills on the weapons, and this was a good first showing. It had Intrepid Heart, which meant you would fill a gauge by attacking, and then that would reduce damage and negate hit reactions on the next blow when ready. Pretty useful. While Hidden Poison would provide a bit of poison buildup for the weapon, even though it was a fire element weapon, which opened up new meta potential. Then you had Violet Mizutsune, a new species of Mizu introduced in this update. Going against its normal watery nature, this was essentially the fire Mizu, spewing out oil-based bubbles rather than water-based ones, and was very visually cool because of it, and it was in that new arena we just mentioned, the Infernal Springs. With that, there were new weapons and armor with slightly different Mizu feel to it, not massive changes, but at least something. And it also introduced the Emboldened skill, which made monsters more likely to enrage when you had it on, while giving you defense and increased evade window while that was the case, which was honestly a fantastic skill and would be great in Wilds with the Agitator meta. There's also Risen Chameleos, progressing this Risen concept of Sunbreak. Risen monsters were essentially afflicted monsters under that anomaly system, but Risen were the ones that overcame the infection. The elder dragons that were just built diff, you know? In this case, it made the monster more aggressive with new moveset options, and it was a much more toxic version of Chameleos, where the poison, it really hurt. It did also have its own armor set and a unique skill with it, unlike say the Apex system. This one was build up boost though. Attacks that inflict ailment damage would simply deal increased damage, so it was a great skill for status builds and relevant in that way. Finally, and this is a big one, it also introduced the layered weapon system for the game. Unlike Iceborne, which did it slowly, it was all there from the start. You just needed to collect vouchers. At that point you had a lot of those, so it wasn't so hard, pretty open to craft these layered weapons. But yeah, that means layered weapons came in the expansion and in Title Update 2, which is a horrifying concept for Wilds and the current boring artian weapon meta that we want to change. So overall, this update had multiple important aspects: the layered weapons, the multiple big monsters to challenge in this update, the continued Risen system, and compared to the Apex system, actual new equipment that mattered. And while we didn't see a siege fight or a big weapon system included here, we did see unique skills for weapons as a consistent concept. And we see in Wilds that with Zoshia and that update, where we now have the White Flame Torrent skill, probably inspired by this system. So do I think Title Update 2 will have layered weapons in Wilds? Probably not, since this was an expansion update, not the base game. But that brings us to our conclusion. From that, we see in Title Update 2 a theme of siege monsters in World and a variety of big bad targets in Rise. What I would expect then is new unique skills associated with new monster weapons, like say Lagiacrus, something completely new there that we've not seen before. I would expect at least a second interesting challenging monster that's not currently revealed outside of Leg himself. There is potential for siege related mechanics involved with Lagiacrus or maybe this other unknown monster, but not guaranteed by any means. Some sort of update for the Artian weapon system would make complete sense, whether it's like an awakened version, new mechanics, or something to challenge the Artian system that actually encourages monster weapons. That'd be great. If not, hopefully some kind of layered weapon system, even if it's only a limited version. But basically, I'm expecting more than just Lagiacrus and one armor set and one weapon set that doesn't have anything meta challenging in it. This should challenge the meta in some relevant way. How far will it go though? We'll have to see. Let me know what you're thinking and what you think this has told you for Title Update 2 in Wilds. We'll be back to cover it all, of course, as it happens. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.